Hello there and welcome to another video. This is Jennifer. So glad you've joined me. Today I have a simple technique for you that takes a one-layer background and gives it lots of texture. This works great with any die cuts. I'll show lots of examples today, and any type of background die. I'll show a lot of examples of those too. If you look closely at these backgrounds, they look very smooth and they have texture on them. This was all done with die cutting. I started the process of making these backgrounds by doing some die cutting of different floral and leaf images. Most of the ones I'm using today are from Crafty Meraki. They have a lot of different floral and leaf die sets that are great for this technique and much more. And I put the name of them up there on the top of the screen. By the way, they call their dies Paradise, in case you were wondering if you look at the supply list. So there are 3 different sets here, just some examples of the die cutting that I did. So I have these little trays that I put the die cuts in, so I have them all organized and ready to go. You can see I did a lot of die cutting on this particular day. That's because I have a lot of cards that I need to make for a certain occasion. So the more die cuts I have ready to go, the more cards I can make pretty quickly. Now, if you've watched my videos, you also know I'm a big fan of leaf dies, leaf stamps, anything with leaf, because you can add flowers or not. You can make it a little more traditional masculine or not, totally up to you. And it works for many occasions. I'm putting the name of the particular leaf dies at the top of the screen as I show them there on the bottom. You can see I have these little baggies from the die cutting that I did off screen, took it upstairs while I was watching a movie, and now I have all of these die cuts ready to make a bunch of cards. I will be using a lot of these die cuts in today's video, especially these leaf dies. I really like them. I cut these from various types of colored cardstock. It doesn't matter if this is lightweight or heavyweight, totally up to you. Both would work for this technique. You'll also notice some are dainty and some are more solid. Doesn't matter, both will work. All right, so here I have a piece of white cardstock. This is 110-pound Neenah Classic Crust, so it's a nice heavyweight cardstock, but use what you have. And I'm gluing some of my leaf die cuts onto the background. The white cardstock is cut to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and I'm just putting a little bit of liquid glue, notice you don't need a lot, onto the back of these fern leaves from Crafty Meraki. And I'm gluing them onto the background as close as I can together to try to fill in all of the space in the background, but not have them overlap or touch. I just think this gives a really fun look to create that whole background. It's almost like you're forming your own pattern paper. I cut these from different scraps of green cardstock that I had built up in my collection, so you'll see there are a variety of greens included. Once I'm done gluing them down, I will flip it over and cut off all the excess. I will keep those pieces I cut off because these little pieces can be used along the edges of my next background when I go back and make more cards like this in the future. So here we have a white cardstock piece covered with those green fern leaf die cuts. You could definitely leave this as is, but normally I would add more leaf die cuts, stack them up for dimension. Today I thought I'd do something different. Instead of adding dimension, I'm going to add texture, and you can do this with a bunch of different background dies. I'm first going to show you how to do this with any kind of background die that cuts little piercings or little faux stitching, not ones that cut large open spaces. Here's a good example. This is a background die from Crafty Meraki called Dance With Me. You can see it cuts around the outside edge, which is a little bit smaller than 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. But everything in the inside is just a piercing or faux stitching pattern. I'm taping this to the front of our layered background. So this is the white cardstock with the green leaves glued to it. I'll tape the die in place. I will first run this through my die cut machine as I would any regular die. You could use any die cut machine you may have. Here with the Platinum 6, you just put the cardstock and die between your cutting plates and run it through. That will cut those little faux stitching pieces into the background. Now I'm putting the embossing mat, that tan flexible mat, and my embossing plate on top of that. This will cause those raised areas on the die to really kind of create an impression. So we have a nice cut and a nice impression. And look at this beautiful background. We have that texture added to it. And it also squeezes the die cuts into the white cardstock, making it look like it's one layer, maybe a pattern paper that you created, with that texture engraved into it. It's just a really beautiful look, and I'll show that again many times in this video, along with some variations. Now I'll cut off the excess so we end up with a panel that is about 5 by 4¼ inches. Now for a sentiment, I'm using a stamp set I've used so many times in videos. This is the Pinkfresh Studios Just a Hello Floral stamp set. It has this one large sentiment stamp. It's a block of sentiments, and you stamp them all at once. I'll even rotate this cardstock and stamp them again, so I can go ahead and have more sentiments ready to go. Once I'm done stamping them, I can use the coordinating die to cut out all of the sentiments at once. This is a huge time saver, and I also like these particular sentiments. They can be used for many things, and the style works with many types of cards. I chose to use the Hope All Is Well for this particular card. I die cut 2 additional white cardstock pieces of the same die and glued that behind our sentiment, so that sentiment stands out against that busy background. Now I'm gluing some Crafty Meraki gems into the open spaces of the background. I really like their gems because they sparkle much more than other ones I have. They're almost got this like magical look to them, and I use them on this card and future cards. They have lots of different colors. This is like the basic one that seems to match everything. Look at how those little gems sparkle. And then take a closer look at the background. It looks like it's smooth with the texture added, but really we layered those die cuts on the cardstock. So if you're looking for a background that has a lot of interest, but not a lot of dimension, this is a great example for you. However, if you do like dimension, I'll show you a variation of this technique at the end of this video that adds some dimension. But first, I'm going to show you some more examples of creating this almost one layer background with lots of texture, because I really think it's a technique that is worth trying with any die cuts you may have. I use mostly leaves and floral images today, but I promise you this works with anything intricate or solid. On this example, I'm using more solid leaves, and the fun part about this is it takes a basic, pretty simple die cut shape and adds interest because of that added texture. Here I'm starting with a piece of pool colored cardstock, and on it I'm gluing a bunch of these large leaves that I cut from various colors of green cardstock. I'm only gluing one layer leaves on here, not stacking it up for dimension. And I'm trying to put them as close together as possible, but I will fill in some of the open spaces with some pool colored little flowers. These little flower dies are from the Crafty Meraki Margaret floral die set. You can see it over there on the left. I like that it cuts lots of different sizes so you can quickly create a bunch of flowers to add as accents. Once I cover this with leaves and flowers, I will trim the excess off the edges, and then I do recommend giving your liquid glue some time to dry before you move on. You could use any glue for this, by the way, whatever you prefer. Now I have another background die from Crafty Meraki. It has a little bit of a different pattern. I'll use this one a few times. It has a lot of that faux stitching detail, which is really great for this technique. So I tape those together, and then I will run them through my die cut machine as I would any die. So I'll go through this again. This is my Spellbinders Platinum. That means I put that paper and die in between the 2 cutting plates and run it through. You could do this technique with whatever die cut machine you have. Just follow the manufacturer's suggestion for using a die and cardstock. Now, once you do this, you don't have to do the next step, but I really prefer it. I think it helps to make the little faux piercing stand out more, and that is to make an impression with the embossing mat. Now, the embossing mat comes with this machine. It's that tan flexible piece. Most die cut machines come with them. So whatever your die cut machine has for doing dry embossing or making an impression with a die, that's the instructions you'll want to follow. So check this out. You've got that amazing texture over the entire background, including all of the die cuts we glued in place. And the pressure of the machine really squished those die cuts into the background cardstock, making it look like it's one layer with texture. The best part about this technique is that's really all you need to do to create a card with a lot of interest. Just add a sentiment, maybe a few embellishments, and you're good to go. I added a Just a Note sentiment from Concord and 9th. I cut the shadow from white cardstock and the letters themselves from gold cardstock. I felt like that was simple and bold enough to go along with this background. The last step was to add a few blue pearls to the center of the flowers, and that's it. This card would be very simple if I wouldn't have added that texture, but it really stands out with that texture added. So at this point, I had fallen head over heels in love with this technique, so I wanted to do a bunch more. And I'm using all of the die cuts that I showed you earlier in this video. So on each of these, I started with white cardstock, added the die cuts with liquid adhesive, trimmed off the excess, gave a little bit of time for the adhesive to dry, and now we can add texture to all these. This is what I like to do when I make multiple cards. Each one will be different, but I did all of my die cutting first, glued all the die cuts on next, then we'll do the technique after that, and then we'll turn them all into cards. And by doing those different steps for each of the cards at once, it really saves time. But again, each of these cards will look very different. You can see this one has very intricate pieces, the little thin area between the big leaves, but the technique will still work. And this one on the left, I wanted to show you don't need to create a background with this technique. I glued one intricate die cut to the center of a white cardstock panel, and it works great. Let's start with the first panel that has some peach flowers. This time I'm using the Crafty Meraki Dancing Feathers background die. Again, this is one that does those little pierced faux stitch lines. I'll show you how to use a different one in a moment. I'll run that through like you would with a regular die, and then we'll also make an impression, keeping that cardstock and die still together in the same place. You can skip this second step if you want to. It's totally optional. It just gives a little more of an impression to make that texture stand out more. So here we have that fun background with the texture added. I just think this is a fun way to get more from your dies. Now, just to finish this one off, super simple. I again use that Concord and 9th Just a Note die. And I am adding some Crafty Meraki gemstones to the center of the flowers. These are super sparkly once again, but they have like a gold tone to them, which I thought looked nice with the sentiment. I also like that these little jars of jewels have super tiny ones too, which are fun to add. So it has multiple sizes, so you can scatter those along the background. So here is the final result. All I added was a sentiment and the gemstones. I do have that all on a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch craft colored note card. I think craft is a great base when you have a colorful background like this. There you can see all of that texture, even on the intricate parts of those leaves and flowers. And you can see how much those gemstones really sparkle. Now, I will tell you, this is like a 1-layer background, right? But I add to it. You don't have to. You could just leave an empty spot where you stamp your sentiment, and then you would have a true 1-layer card. Okay, now this is the background where I just had white cardstock with a single green leaf die cut in the center. I am taping that to my background die, and this time I'm only making an impression. I'm not cutting it like you normally would with a die. So this makes a deeper impression, but not little cuts. It's just a different look that you can get from your dies. And look at how it adds that pattern over that single die cut. It's a great way to even take a simple card design and step it up. Now this single leaf background there, I'm not going to actually use that on a card today. I'm going to save that for later. I wanted to focus on backgrounds today just because it really shows off the technique more. So let's move on to our other background. We've glued all the leaf die cuts down. This time I'm using a more traditional background die. Not one that pierces, but one that rather cuts a background. This is the Crafty Meraki Plaid background. So any background die would work for this. This time we're not going to cut again. We're not cutting with this die. We don't want to cut into those flowers and have holes in them. Instead, we're just making an impression with this die. So I have my embossing mat, my embossing plate on top. I'll run that through. This puts pressure of that die into our background. So now we will have a plaid pattern on our background, and you can see the texture. It's even more texture than the other types of dies I was using. So any background die can be used for this technique. I also wanted to add some flowers on this background, and I thought I'd show you a trick. This is the Emma Meraki Paradise from Crafty Meraki. You can see those flowers that I used earlier. I wanted a different look from them. I wanted them to be smaller. So I took a few different size small circle dies, and I'm just taping them temporarily to the center of the flowers. I'll then run that through my die cut machine, and it'll cut the petals shorter, giving the flower a different kind of style or design, and also making it smaller. So now I have a variety of smaller sized flowers to add to our background. And I think this is a fun way to get more from your flower dies. You can also do this with other die cuts. Try changing them so you can get a different look. So now I have all of these smaller flower die cuts, and I'll glue them scattered around our sentiment. You can see I really like this Concord in 9th sentiment. I use it a lot. In fact, I pre-die cut a bunch of the layered die cuts, so I have them ready to add quickly to cards like I'm doing here. So I'm just gluing these little flowers here and there along the background. These flowers don't have the texture because I didn't glue them on before we did the technique. Instead, these will sit on top of that background. Now, if you do decide to do a stamp sentiment on your background, so you have a 1-layer background, what I would recommend doing is stamping your sentiment on the white cardstock. Glue your die cuts around it, then do the technique. You definitely want to stamp before doing the texture technique. So on this card, I added it to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch top folding green note card. And I also added some peach pearls to the center of the flowers. Once you've got the technique done, it doesn't take much time to finish it off. Okay, let's do something a bit different. We'll step away from the leaves for a moment, and let's do this butterfly background. This one was very fast pulled together because I used a background die cut for my layering. So I had this butterfly mini Slimline die from Crafty Meraki, and I cut that from a light kind of mint color, and I'm gluing it onto a slightly darker mint color, just using a little bit of liquid adhesive here and there and gluing those together. So instead of using a bunch of individual die cuts, here I'm using one background die cut. I'll press that down and then trim off the excess of the darker mint color, and then give it a few minutes for that liquid adhesive to dry. If you use any other type of adhesive, you don't have to worry about that step. Okay, so now let's add texture to this. I'm using this mini Slimline background die from Crafty Meraki. It's the same pattern that I used on a couple of my earlier cards, but it is a mini Slimline size. So if you really like to do mini Slimline or Slimline, I know Crafty Meraki has a lot of these background dies in those sizes. So I tape that to the front of our layered cardstock panel. I'll run that through like a regular die, and then I will again run it through with the tan embossing mat so we make more of an impression. So this is a great way to make a card very quickly. Because we didn't do a bunch of intricate individual die cuts to cover the background, we used just one background die cut. And now look at that. You really stepped it up by putting that texture over the entire piece. Now for the sentiment on this one, I reached back to one of my old favorites from Pinkfresh Studio. There is this one large stamp. You stamp that and then use the one large die to cut them all out at once. There's also a hot foil plate, but I used the stamp set. This works very similar to the Just a Hello that I used earlier in this video. After adding the sending hugs sentiment, I did add 3 little butterflies. I thought this was a great way to kind of mimic the butterflies in the background, but add a little bit of interest without covering up much of the background. And once again, I added some Crafty Meraki sparkles. So this was super fast to pull together, but really is extra special because of that added texture. It would be fun to do a set of these in different colors and give them as a gift. Okay, let's do a variation of this technique. If you like dimension, this is a good option for you. Now, this time I'm starting with 3 leaf die cuts, and I am temporarily adhering them to a piece of printer paper, something thin. Any kind of thin paper would work. So I'm temporarily putting these exactly where I want them to be in my background. When I glue 3 things down in a line, I usually glue the outside 2 first, then the inside one. It makes the spacing easier. Once I'm happy with the placement, we're going to do the technique directly onto this thin piece of paper with the die cuts added. That thin piece of paper is just a temporary holding spot. So I have a Crafty Meraki background. This is one that does the little piercing. I obviously really like the look of these. And I will run this through my die cut machine as we would a regular die, doing the exact same process we've done many times here. I then will put that paper and the die back in, but with the embossing mat, and make an impression this time. Then I will take another piece of just white cardstock, regular heavyweight white cardstock, whatever you use for crafting, and I'll take the same die, put that on the front, and make an impression on there. If you want to cut with it first, you can. But this will be the same background die. So now what we'll do is we will remove the leaves from our temporary paper and glue it onto this nice cardstock one. This way, I will be able to add some dimension behind the leaves. So let's start with our first leaf here. I'll just carefully peel it off from that temporary paper. I just put a little bit of temporary adhesive on the back so it comes off pretty easily. Now on the back of this, I'll glue 3 additional die cuts. These don't have texture, but that's okay. You're not going to see them anyways. The only reason I'm putting them back there is so we get some nice, strong dimension behind our fancy textured die cut. By the way, that little block there is just a heavy piece of countertop sample that a blog reader sent to me, and it is a great paperweight to hold die cuts together as the glue dries. I encourage you to have something heavy that you can use when crafting. Okay, so now we have some dimension behind that. So we can glue this now onto our nice background. This is the one where we made the impression onto white cardstock, and I'm just lining up the pattern. We have the same pattern on our background and our leaf die cut, so I can easily line it up so we still have that continuous look of the texture, but we just have dimension behind our die cuts this time. I will repeat the process with the other die cuts. I put the textured one on top, 3 solid ones behind it, and then glue it onto the background, lining up with the pattern on the background of the texture. And then finally we'll do it with the last leaf too. So here's a closer look. We have dimension on those leaves, but that texture pattern is continuous over everything. Just takes a little bit more time because of the added layers, but it's a fun alternative to this technique. So I glued that background onto a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch green note card, and then I added a Hope All Is Well from that Pinkfresh Studio Just a Hello floral stamp and die set that I showed you at the beginning of this video. I also added 3 small butterfly die cuts. I really wanted to make sure that the star of the show on this card, which is that texture in the background, that a lot of that showed. And you really can see how the pattern is continuous across it all. I really wish you could see these cards in real life because the texture is even more impressive than it is in the video, so I really encourage you to give this a try. Grab some background dies and then any other dies and try this technique. If you're interested in these supplies, they are linked below in my YouTube description. You can also head to my blog where I have a lot more information for you. Thanks for watching and spending this time with me. Here are a couple other related videos if you're interested in watching, and we'll see you again soon.